everyone for coming out tonight. I want to thank the pastor of this house. I'm going to say this. When I'm in his house, I'm going to respect his house, and I'm going to respect the guests that I'm going to say is my guest. Let me lay some ground rules out. I have Judge McAfee here that presided over a high-profile case. When I first started out to do this forum, I reached out to his group, and they decided not to do a forum with me, and then they come back and said a Zoom. So being a high-profile case, I committed to a Zoom. This judge right here, Judge Krause, I contacted everybody on the ballot and some more judges that's not in Fulton County, and I never sent Judge Krause an email. Didn't know she was running till later. So later on, Judge McAfee, he decided that, well, I'll come in person. I want to thank Judge McAfee for coming. I understand your profile, high-profile case, but I said anything dealing with the case is off limits. Any questions come through online, off limits. We're only going to talk about the judgeship. We had other judges that came that was running for judge, say. One came, the other one didn't come. So may it be, this is how we're going to do it today. And my moderators are Kathy Adams and Joe Flint. Again, I want to thank Mr. O and the camera crew. And now I'm going to turn it over to Kathy Adams. I also sent people an email. Again, I was going through campaign managers with these two judges, and if you didn't get the email from them, I'm asking to leave a donation for this church because of the lights, the water, and etc. Thank you so much, and if you don't, then I'll pick up the slack. Now I'm going to turn it over to Kathy Adams and Joe. Thank you.
Thank you, Damita. Good evening, everyone. My name is Kathy Adams, and I will serve as your moderator for the evening. It is certainly a pleasure to be here with both of the sitting judges. So Judge McAfee and Judge Krause. So welcome. And welcome to our in-person guests as well as our online virtual audience. We will, this evening, we will cover the races for the Fulton County Superior Court judges. There are two races. These two candidates are running in two different races. And so do you want to make the distinct difference there? They were on two separate ballots and both have opposition. So we welcome them both to the South Fulton County, but also to our neighboring audiences here, again, both in person and our virtual audience. So what I'd like to do is to share with you a little bit of the housekeeping rules, housekeeping and the rules for this evening. Each of the candidates will be given a minute and a half to for their opening statement. You'll also be given a minute and a half to respond to each of the questions, and we do have a time clock here. And then the candidates will be given 2 minutes for their closing statement. And the moderator will call on the candidates in the order that he or she chooses. Do understand that you may not have the same questions, but you will have the same number of questions. And there may be an opportunity where you will have the same question, but it won't come sequential. So, and we will also accept questions from our in-person audience via index cards. And they will be passed along to both Joe and I, and we will share that information with you. As far as our virtual audience, we will take questions online via the chat, and Joe and I will vet those questions before they are asked. So we will operate in a manner of honesty and fairness. So also, again, just remember that you will have the same number of questions, but you may not have the same questions. So without further ado, what I'd like to do is give both of you an opportunity to, well, I'm going to let Joe do a little bit of the opening there. I've already given the house rules, the ground rules, and a little bit about housekeeping, but Joe's going to go ahead and grace us with the opening.
Again, thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Judge McAfee and Judge Krause, and thank you for our audience for being here today. Welcome to the Fulton County Superior Court Judges Candidate Forum. In this year's election, ladies and gentlemen, we have candidates that have qualified to run for these seats. This evening, we will hear from the candidates running for two different, as was mentioned earlier, two different judicial seats, both in the Atlanta Judicial Court. All candidates have been invited to participate in this evening's forum. One opponent we heard from last week. This evening, we will hear from the incumbents of both judicial seats. Each candidate will share information about themselves as to why they are the better candidate for the position to represent the citizens and residents of Fulton County. Again, as Kathy mentioned, each of the candidates is seeking to govern, create policy, manage budgets, and be a visionary, creating long-term plans for substantial growth. More so, lead with tact and diplomacy. Our candidates will be, as Kathy mentioned, kept by a timekeeper, will sound the bell when it's time to end each statement. If the candidate goes beyond their time limit, they will be interrupted. Tonight, we are presenting the information to the voters in a fair, nonpartisan setting. So without further ado, let's get the forum started and hear from our candidates.
So first, I would like to introduce, I'm going to start with the female here. How about that? Judge Rachel Krause. She is an incumbent, and she is running for the Fulton County Superior Court seat, the Atlanta Judicial Circuit. And so, Judge Krause, if you would, you have a minute and a half to share your opening statement.
Thank you. First, thank you so much for providing this opportunity, and to Ms. Chatman, who disappeared, but who I know spearheads this group. So as she said, my name is Rachel Krause. I'm a judge on the Fulton County Superior Court. I've been serving for 5 years as a judge, and there are really two things I'm most proud of and would want potential voters to know. Number one is that I manage my docket closely. You may have heard, if you watch the news, about a backlog. I'm proud to tell you that I don't have a backlog in my courtroom. I have been in court as often as is possible, consistently holding hearings and motions, calendars to make sure that cases are heard timely so that crime victims have their day in court, criminal defendants have their day in court. And also families, people that are having disputes with their neighbors or that are involved in contractual disputes. Everybody deserves their day in court, and the best way that a judge can provide it is to be in court. The second thing I'd like people to know about me that I'm very passionate about is that in addition to managing my docket, I also volunteer to serve as an accountability court judge, which enables me to work with people who are struggling with substance abuse, who may have committed crimes because of that substance abuse. And people that are smarter than I am about substance abuse work with them on that aspect. But I work with them through the judicial process, meet with them twice a month for about 1.5 years to make sure that they have an off-ramp out of the criminal justice system if that's not where they belong. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Judge Krause. And so now we'll hear from Judge Scott McAfee, and he is also running for re-election of the Fulton County Superior Court, Atlanta Judicial Circuit. So, Judge.
Thank you, Kathy, and thank you, Pastor Flint, for hosting us into the Citizens for Excellence, and Ms. Chatman for your civic engagement for making this happen. My name is Scott McAfee, and I grew up in the metro Atlanta area. I'm a lifelong Georgian. I'm a husband and father, and after law school, I decided I wanted to devote my career to public service. So I started out as a state and later a federal prosecutor. And I was later appointed to be Georgia's Inspector General, where we policed waste, fraud, and abuse throughout the entire executive branch. But for the past year, it's been my tremendous honor to serve as your Fulton County Superior Court judge. And I'm asking for a full term at this point and for your vote, because I want to keep doing what I committed to doing, which was providing fair, accountable, and efficient justice for everyone in this county. And so at this point, I think many of you have been able to see me in action, and I think that's all I've asked for, is that I want to give everyone their fair day in court and to do it in a timely manner. And so I'm asking for your vote. Already early voting has started, and we're all the way at the end of that ballot, but we've got until May 21st to get our vote in. And thank you again for your time tonight.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So, ladies and gentlemen, you've heard from both of the incumbents, and you've heard their position. You've heard a little bit about what it is they're doing already. And so now, without further ado, we'll go ahead and get the forum started, and we'll go ahead and ask the first question. And I'm going to ask Judge Krause, what is your engagement with the environmental crimes in Fulton County, such as those cases with the water boys, the slider crimes, and, you know, those that are doing the drag racing?
Well, as a person who lives in the community, I'm not a huge fan. As a judge, however, I'm often, it's not something that I'm typically engaging with in my role. Superior Court judges are typically handling significant felonies, murder, gang cases, sex crimes, things like that. And so it is incumbent upon our magistrate judges they're the ones who usually see those initial types of crimes that are the environmental crimes. I think it's important, whichever court is addressing them, though. Occasionally they do rise to, they do end up in my courtroom. But the Superior Court presides over what we call a non-complex division. And so occasionally we will deal with them when they are consistent and repeated by the same offender. And that's something that I know citizens are very concerned about, this repeat offender dynamic that we have. And I know a lot of people may not be aware that the Fulton County Court has a repeat offender docket. And so when in the non-complex division, or when the district attorney's office identifies an individual as someone who is a repeat offender, they are flagged for us so that we can take into specific account when we're considering bond issues and sentencing issues, if they are convicted or take a plea, that this person has a significant repeat offender background. And that's those types of environmental crimes is where that comes up the most.
Thank you so very much, Judge Krause. This question is for Judge McAfee. Judge McAfee, understanding that this is your first actual election, what would a successful term look like to you?
A successful term for me is one that looks a lot like the past year. And I'll tell you what I mean by that is that when I took over this docket, this was a docket that had felt the full effects of the COVID pause. It had been open for a while, and yet new cases kept coming in. So I had the second highest volume, and I even had the oldest docket in terms of the age of the cases. So I was 14th out of 15th, second to dead last. In 1 year, I've been able to take that, and I'm now in 5th place. So, and I'm vying to be on the podium very soon. And Judge Krause and I are kind of elbowing each other out of the way for that spot. And so I've been able to do that just by getting the job done. It's by having a work ethic and a commitment to wanting to give people their day in court. And so what I'm hoping to do is get to a point by the end of the term. First of all, I can tell you, I think I'm going to be #1 by the end of the term. And I'm confident to make that promise now. But my goal is to get it to a point where the cases are arraigned, and within 90 to 120 days, I can have you on a trial calendar. And so if it's a situation where we have to deny bond because we think that the factors call for it, that's not something where I have to worry that your entire life is going to be destroyed while you wait in the Fulton County Jail for your day in court. You ought to have that efficiently, and you ought to have that and be able to have the state put its burden of proof up. And so if we're talking a 3 to 4 month process, I think that's something where the parties know, they get notice, we give them advance notice, and then we show up ready for trial. And then we move on to the next case. So that's what I'm absolutely going to be focused on is making our criminal justice system work.
Thank you so very much.
So, Judge Krause, what are your top 3 priorities?
So my first priority is just managing the docket. Again, making sure that I'm in court, and making sure I'm a little bit of a spreadsheet nerd. So I have a giant spreadsheet that has all of my cases on it. And then I keep track of each of the cases. So when I know I have a calendar coming up, like today, I had a 47 position calendar. We had spent all day working through that calendar to figure out whether people were going to go to trial or if they were going to accept a plea, what was going to happen with those cases. And the only way to be prepared for those types of large calendars and to be prepared for what the lawyers are going to tell you is to be prepared. And so my #1 focus is always being prepared in the courtroom. My second priority is, as I said, accountability court. It's something that I've been doing for 4 years of the 5 that I've been on the bench. I get tremendous enjoyment out of it, particularly the graduations that we have 4 times a year, where we are able to stand there and tell people's family and friends about all the wonderful things that they've done, but all the hard work that they've put in to get to where they are and have that moment of graduation and commencement back into the community and in their families, which is really how it's supposed to work. And the third thing is just moving the court judicial forward. I also am on the Pattern Jury Instruction Committee for the state judiciary, and so I assist in making sure that they're written as they should be.
Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Judge McAfee, I have a question. You mentioned earlier about pandemic cases. And so my question is, what suggestions can you offer in how handling, let me say that again, what suggestions can you offer on how to handle any remaining pandemic imposed case bookings?
Yeah, you just have to be invested in each of them individually and what's holding them up and kind of diagnose them of what at this point. I mean, we got to realize, I mean, we've been back in action for 2.5 years, so the excuses are running out, right? So you got to know for each individual case, what's the holdup? I mean, has it been changing through defense attorneys? Are there still pending motions we got to write and get on the docket? I think a lesson out of the pandemic that we've all taken advantage of is leveraging technology and make sure that we're all on Zoom. So if an attorney just needs to drop in for a quick announcement, they can do that over Zoom as long as we can keep moving the case forward. So I mean, I think the lessons coming out of the pandemic are all there. Again, sometimes the job it's not the most exciting forum because all we can really talk about is our resume and how we're going to be more fair than the other guy. But I think the difference is showing when you have a record and you have a resume to back that up and the results to show, that's what can make the difference here. But more to the point, it's just making sure that you stay focused on the end goal, that you use every tool in the arsenal, right? And so I think coming out of it, Zoom is the one that I would say has been the most effective, and also at this point, just kind of holding the lawyer's feet to the fire. And so when the trial week comes around, we're ready to go, and I know the case from start to finish, and we're ready to move forward.
Thank you so very much.
So I'm just going to piggyback and ask you another question, Judge. And so very quickly, want to talk about case logs, backlogs. And you touched on it just a little bit, but there was a backlog pre-pandemic. So we lived through the pandemic and we picked up more. What are your plans on handling that? You talked about your desire to come up on the list and not be 14th, but you are number 5 now. So what's the strategy on managing that case backlog?
Yeah, and it just seems like it's the continual thing we hear over and over again. I mean, it feels like the AJC could rerun that article every 5 years about, they wouldn't even have to change anything, just update the dates about how, oh, we've got, too many folks in the jail and too many cases. So it's just in a county, the largest and busiest county in Georgia, that's always going to be here. It's always going to be part of the job. And so it's kind of like, gardening. You just have to stay on top of it. And you've got to make sure that you keep a focus on having individuals in there who still have the drive and the work ethic to do it, who actually want to do the job. And care about the work. So, personally, I didn't get into this job to, for the spotlight or for, partisan points. I would be perfectly happy just plugging away at all of these cases day in, day out. And I think that's kind of the attitude you've got to take. But you ask for specifics, and that's where we can get into the nuances of it. And it's really just knowing the life cycle of a case from start to finish. It's knowing where the hurdles are, where they can fall off track. And you know that by having devoted your career to trial work. I mean, I've tried any number of cases, and I know where the pitfalls are. And when you know where they are, you can see them coming, and you can get in front of them. And you can know, well, if we go down that route, that's going to slow us down 6 months. What can we do to shorten that to 3 months instead of 6? And we can talk about the nuances of that all night. But to your point, I think just experience plays a key role in that, and a devotion to knowing how a trial works.
Thank you so very much. Judge Krause, can you tell me, what do you think is the most difficult part of being a part of the Superior Court judge? And how are you prepared to overcome any of the challenges that you may face in this new term?
Well, I mean, I think that being a judge is a hard job. And I know it is an elected position, but at the end of the day, it's a job that you have to do, and it's a hard job. And I don't think that anyone doubts that. But I think that when you ask that type of question, that really the focus is on as a judge, you are making decisions that affect people's lives. You are deciding whether someone is released on a bond. You're deciding whether somebody gets out of jury duty or still has to stay there. You are deciding disputes between neighbors, family members, any number of issues that we decide on a routine basis. And you have to make sure that you are prepared and as knowledgeable as you can be about the law, while also, I think, being a person with heart and with investment in your community, so that you can put that in context of what it does to the community, what your decisions, the effects that they have, as long as you're comfortable that they're right, that they are right in the sense that you are comfortable that you've made the best decision that you can with the law that you were presented and the facts that you're given. And so that's most clearly the most difficult part of being a judge, is because you have to, that weight settles on your shoulders when you have to make those decisions.
Thank you so very much.
So next, I have a question for Judge McAfee. What is your plan or proposal for racial disparities and laws and sentencing practices and other matters?
Well, when it comes to, the laws themselves, that's where I've, got to make sure that I explain my role, which is that, in my view, the judges are supposed to be applying the law as it's written and what you have presented to you. So I don't believe it's supposed to be our mandate to go out there and tell the General Assembly issues of policy. And so if there's documented evidence of racial disparity and that comes to me in a case, then that's certainly something I can address. I mean, I see the role as a judge as deciding cases properly before the court. So if someone thinks there's an equal protection case to be made based on racial disparity, then I'm going to hear that and I'm going to give it absolute, full consideration. And the day-to-day, though, I view it as you have to zoom in on each individual case and make sure that you're deciding that case on its merits, because every single case can be so totally different. Even if we're talking about the exact same charged crime, each of them comes with their own nuances. Each of them comes with a different, unique victim, and each defendant has different mitigation, different things speaking for or against him or her. And so it's the idea of being able to zoom out and see what's going on from a full high level viewpoint is very tough. All I can tell you is that in my little corner of the world, as one of 15 judges on the Superior Court handling criminal cases, I'm making sure that each case is decided on what it should be decided on.
Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Judge Krause, I wanted to ask you concerning complex litigation. One of the things that you do on a regular basis is you're managing complicated criminal cases. And so my question is, what is the most complex piece of litigation in which you've had to involve yourself?
Well, two spring to mind. If you're specifically, you mentioned complex criminal litigation. So I'm currently presiding over a 10 co-defendant gang murder case. That case had to be broken up into pieces to enable us to use the resources that we have that sometimes are limited, to have that many defendants in a room at the same time. It was broken up into pieces, and we've now tried two parts of that case. We have 5 defendants still remaining who need to have their trials. And so that was quite a complex piece of litigation, in the sense that there are, multiple lengthy, complicated pretrial motions about statements, particularly statements made by, one alleged conspirator that implicates another alleged conspirator. So it implicates a great deal of constitutional issues about confrontation and about, voluntary statements, et cetera. So that was very complicated. And then to get to the trial and to help a group of jurors who don't have that life experience, right, understand what's being presented to them, and make sure that I'm giving them the right law to make those decisions. From a civil perspective, though, I think people forget that, so my background is actually, I was a civil litigation attorney for 18 years before I became a judge. And so I've dealt with a great deal of complex litigation, and we have a business court for that, and I'm on the court's business court committee.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you. So the next question is for Judge McAfee. What is your overall judicial philosophy?
So, to me, when people ask that question, a lot of times they're looking at, the United States Supreme Court, and they're talking about the isms like purposivism, originalism, textualism, these really kind of nuanced academic debates. And in my experience at the trial court, those really just don't impact your average litigant. To me, my judicial philosophy as a trial court judge focuses on demeanor and work ethic, and making sure that everyone has the ability to come in and be heard. And so, it's more of an approach, that an outlook that, to me, the judge isn't the most important person in the room. The judge is only there because these two parties have a dispute that needs to get resolved. And so the lawyers are the star in court, in my mind. And when it's time for a jury trial, it's the lawyers who get to put on the show. I'm there to step in if I think that the laws of the state or the federal constitution aren't being followed. But I think it's that approach of again, humility, of an idea that this process is here to be transparent and to be open. That's what I would say are some of the guiding themes of my work in the court. And as I said before, I mean, the job of a judge, if summarized simply, is to decide cases that are properly before you. And so it's not to go out looking where you're, frankly, you're not supposed to be in the first place, right? And so it's to know your lane, to stay in your lane, and to do the job in front of you.
Fantastic. Thank you so very much. I'm going to come back to you, Judge McAfee. How do you approach learning new things, and how will you get up to speed in an area of law for which you are not or which you don't have any experience in?
Yeah, absolutely. So, there's over 50 titles in our legal system, right? There's 50 of these books, and there's so many laws in there. You could spend your whole career, you won't read every single one of them. So I'm not going to come in here and make it sound like you know every single thing about this job. There's always going to be a learning curve in every new job, and I've certainly experienced that in all of my roles. When I transitioned from state to federal prosecution, I had a whole new criminal code I had to learn about. When I went from federal prosecution to being an inspector general, I dealt with state admin law. And so each time I've been confronted with these whole new worlds of law and of procedure and of things to do, you see a learning curve, and you've got to recognize, I've got to sprint up this thing to get up to speed. And I think I've done that in each of those roles. And I think the way you do it is by recognizing that you don't know everything, and that you know who to ask when you have questions. And I've been able to rely on the other members of the bench. But in other respects, there's some things that are old hat at this point. I mean, I know how to try a case. I know what a criminal trial looks like. And so those I felt very comfortable doing from the beginning, because I've been doing it as a prosecutor all along. And so in other aspects in the civil world, it's just making sure that that I do my homework, right? I'm not going to go into court and wing it when it's a matter I'm seeing for the first time. So I think it's just understanding that I want to get to the right result in every case. And you just, as long as you have that attitude, I think the parties can respect it, and you kind of go from there.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And Judge Krause, going to ask you the same question about the racial disparities. And it's like, what is your proposal in the law and sentencing, when it comes to those practices and dealing with racial disparities?
So I think that sentencing is a particular area where judges do have some discretion, without doubt. Although the legislature, the General Assembly, has provided pretty clear guidance in a lot of cases. They may give you a range, but they've limited some of the discretion that judges have to make decisions in sentencing. The reason I mentioned sentencing in particular is because I think Judge McAfee's point a little bit ago, sentencing is the place, I think, there, and bond in the criminal context is the place where you really are trying to take into account as much information as you have about the person as a whole, right? Not just the offense for which they are accused, or if you're sentencing, the offense to which they've pleaded guilty or have been convicted, but also the person that they are. And so often you'll hear from family members, you'll hear from victims. And so I think Judge McAfee is right that it's probably not the judge's role to be specifically concerned about racial bias issues. That's a matter for policy associated with the legislature and perhaps higher courts. But I do think that in those two particular instances, it is the best place that judges have to try to be aware of and take into account the life circumstances that might have led that person there, while still balancing that against the need for accountability of the individual choices.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Judge McAfee, I'd like to ask you, what is your thought on the use of excessive force?
As it relates to,
As you know, let me back that up. When you have an excessive force case, how do you approach it from a nonpartisan state?
well, I think so much of what what that topic is exploring is really that ship has sailed, but by the time it reaches me, right, that's going to be the charging decision. Whether a use of force was appropriate or not, that's a decision that gets made by the prosecuting attorney at the front end. And so by the time it gets to me, it's assigned to me, and I've got this indictment where maybe it's a use of force where an officer has been indicted, or maybe it was a defendant who resisted arrest and now he's been charged with obstruction. So by the time the issue gets to me, the initial decision has been made. And so the only way I'm going to be able to weigh in is we have an immunity statute in Georgia where a defense attorney can file it and say he or she's client acted in self-defense, and that's where we could get in and explore it. But I mean, so much of it, I mean, we've got the self-defense statute in Georgia. We've got the appropriate use of force and the guidelines that are supposed to happen. I haven't had a case like that on the docket in the past year. I don't think I have one assigned to me yet. But the reality is that we've got enough precedent, and it's a fact-driven inquiry. So it's very hard to say at a broad level what the position is without talking about a specific case, right? Gotcha. But I'll say I'll apply the law as it's written the best I can.
Thank you.
Judge Krause, can you explain your philosophy on judicial temperament, and how does that temperament qualify you for this position?
Well, I have 3 teenagers and I can keep my cool even when they don't. So, but in all seriousness, I think that judicial temperament is crucial to an orderly courtroom and to investment by the litigants that are in front of you. I am very proud of the fact that I think if you ask jurors that have served in my courtroom, I think if you ask lawyers who have served in my courtroom, everyone in my courtroom is treated with respect and dignity that they are entitled to by just being there. And you don't need a law degree. You don't need to not be a criminal defendant. You just need to be a person. And that means you're entitled to have your moment to speak respectfully to the court about what issue you're in front of me for. That means you're entitled to be called Mr. or Ms. That means that you are entitled to be engaged with in the same way that I would engage with anyone else. I'm often asked if there's a concern about, when you need deputies to step in or something. And what I have found in my experience is that I don't usually need deputies to step in, because if your temperament is the right way, which is, I actually had someone tell me one time they characterized it as mean nice, which my children agreed with. But basically the idea is I'm firm, but I'm fair. And so I have not had an experience of having a lot of outbursts because people are respectful of that dynamic.
It's nice, nasty, Judge. Nice. I'm going to come back to you, Judge Krause. Understanding that, you'll have a lot of, in the past few years that you've served as judge, you've worked with the chamber staff.
Yes.
And so what is your leadership style, and how do you work well with your chamber staff?
So I have had my chamber staff with me since the day I started. I love them. I cannot say enough good things about Ms. Johnson and Ms. German and Mr. Freehoff. And I did recently need to hire a new court reporter, so Ms. Cantrell. But they are consummate professionals, and I am super happy to have their help in doing the work of the court. They are all people who have experience in the justice system, people who have experience in running offices, as my Ms. Johnson. But they are wonderful people who, if we share the ability to move the cases forward and do the hard work, but also enjoy each other's company. I also think that I am very proud to have them be extensions of me in the sense that when you're talking to a judge's staff, you're functionally talking to the judge. And I know that lawyers tell me routinely, and jurors for that matter, that they love my staff, that they think my staff is wonderful, professional, educated, knowledgeable, and kind and easy to deal with. And so they make it easy for me to do my job, which is to make the decisions on the bench, because they've done their job, which is to prepare those cases and organize the calendars and make sure that we get where we need to be.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you. And Judge McAfee, I have a question for you. How will you manage or balance your work and the cases, ensuring that they receive the proper attention?
Well, I mean, the idea is that you have to, you recognize each one of them is important. So, I mean, the balance comes in, I guess, trying to be as efficient as you can. I mean, at no point am I going to say that I'm only going to focus on one thing and let everything else fall by the wayside. Everything that gets assigned to me, and I'm going to treat it as a priority. So I think I balance it. When you've gone far enough into something, you need to get out and move to the next thing. I think it comes with experience, and the more you work each case to know where to go. And I think it also is important that we talk so much about, spreadsheets and the numbers and everything else. And that's true. And I've just got to make sure that I never give into the idea that the widgets are just numbers, right? These are real people with real problems, and they're counting on me to get it right. So I think I just remember that they wouldn't have brought this to me if it wasn't something that was serious, than something that needed solving. And I'm just trying to give it its full measure of justice.
Thank you so very much. Judge Krause, what would you say is the most important issue facing the county at this moment?
Resources, or sometimes a lack thereof. I think that judges are the most visual or visible, I should say, representatives of the case, the court system. And, we talk about our case counts and cases that we have. But I think what a lot of people don't realize is that every time I'm in court, there are any number of resources that are being deployed in support of having that court proceeding. So it will be deputies that I've brought into the courtroom. It will be Department of Community Service probation officers that have come into the courtroom, of course, DAs, of course, public defenders. But there have been some, staffing difficulties in each of those areas, and those are crucial in terms of moving the system forward, making it work, making sure that all the pieces are together. I would also note that we, specifically on accountability court, I'm particularly attuned to the fact that we struggle finding sufficient housing, emergency housing for our clients in drug court, mental health resources to find people whose, issues with the criminal justice system are the result of their mental health struggles. And those are all programs that we need further support for. And that's something that that support, having those resources available, helps things move more smoothly and address people's concerns.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So, Judge McAfee, how will you work to make Fulton County the best judicial circuit in the state?
Well, the great news is that the infrastructure is already there. It doesn't require me alone. And I think that's the overarching idea, is that to have the best judicial circuit, there's so many different moving parts, and they've all got to be working together and functioning well. And so to me, that comes down to limiting I guess the way I'd put it is unforced errors, where it's just a clash of personalities or ego or something like that, where instead of, focusing on the actual heart of the problem, we get distracted by other areas. I think that's a big part of the work. I think we need to be able to show when it's a case that people are watching, just how things can work, and just that we can provide everyone a fair day in court. The one thing I've tried to advocate with that is in transparency, is that from the very beginning, I put all my trials and all my major motions on YouTube. So if someone wants to tune in and watch them live, they can, just so they can see exactly what we're doing. A lot of times they can be pretty long and mundane, but you can watch it from start to finish. And I think that message of transparency and accountability is something that goes a long way. So it's not just this mysterious thing that happens behind closed doors. But there's just a lot of aspects, and so much of it to me comes down to the investment you have in it, that you want to make it better, and that you're willing to be part of the solution and not throw up roadblocks or drama.
Thank you so very much. Judge Krause, can you describe for us or give us some background of your pro bono and community service work?
Yes. So I have taught Sunday school for 10 years at my church, Holy Spirit. I have worked with the Atlanta Community Food Bank. I've been the person raising money for the legal food frenzy. I did that as an attorney. And then while I was on the bench as well, to raise money for the Atlanta Community Food Bank and food banks across the state. I also really enjoy talking. I'm a mom and I love my kids, and I enjoy talking with kids generally. And so I've had a great deal of enjoyment working with different programs through the Fulton County Schools and the Atlanta Public Schools where my children attend, that gives me an opportunity to talk with both very young children and then also older children, where you can have maybe a little more nuanced conversation about the importance of civic engagement, the importance of what the role of the judiciary is, and developing an understanding of that. Beyond that, in terms of pro bono as an attorney, I have, when I was a private attorney, had represented various individuals who were involved in, had need for pro bono representation in the civil context, and participated in a great number of the state bar and Atlanta bar funded groups that will provide, like AVLF and other types of programs to provide pro bono services.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So this question is for Judge McAfee. What do you think are what is the most difficult part of being a judge and managing the roles and the cases in your position? What are the challenges?
Yeah, I would just say that it never feels like there's enough hours in the day, right? And I'm sure that's how it feels for everybody. But that's just kind of the recurring theme I come back to. I mean, when I'm ready to press send on an order I've written and I've spent all week writing it, I'm always wondering in the back of my mind, if I just spent a day or two more on this, maybe I'd catch another issue or I could make it a little better. But you can't. You got to put it out there and move on because someone else is waiting on you and your time. So I think that's been the biggest struggle I found over the last year is that I want to clone myself, I guess, and going through that, but yeah, and the other things that come up day in, day out is just making sure that I'm being even-handed throughout the day. I don't want to ever make my own personal issues, bring those into the courtroom, and feel like the cases could be affected differently. I mean, you might have heard of these kind of studies where they say, people, if it's right before lunch, they may get sentenced differently than if it's after lunch and the judge has had lunch, or something like that. I don't want anything like that to ever come into play. So I'm going to show up caffeinated and ready to go.
Thank you so very much for that. I always say that if dinosaurs had coffee, they'd be here today. I'm a firm believer in that. Judge Krause, I want to know, again, you're a judge. If you observe a party in your courtroom being poorly represented or by an unprepared or ineffectual lawyer, how would you handle that situation?
So, it's hard. I know that's probably too simplistic of an answer, but it is incumbent in the system. We have an adversarial system, right? So the object of our system is that both sides are represented. They present the evidence that they believe is the most relevant, and then the decision maker makes the decision. Whether sometimes that's me, most frequently in my courtroom, it's a jury. And so the idea of the system works best when both attorneys are well prepared and well qualified. And sometimes that's not happening. And when that's not happening, it is your job as a judge not to intervene, but to make sure that things are proceeding in the manner that they should. And so the best thing that I can do is during my pretrial conferences and during, conferences with the attorneys during pretrial motions and other hearings, talk out the issues with the attorneys to make sure that the attorneys are thinking about all the issues. Ask questions so that the lawyers understand what I'm thinking about in terms of I've reviewed the case and I'm interested to know about this issue, which is a signal to them that this is an issue I think is of importance that you should be prepared for. And so mostly what you can do is guide and hope they get there. If they don't get there, there is a procedure by which a defendant can make a motion for new trial on the basis of ineffective assistance, and we'll
Thank you
assess it
so
at that
much,
time.
Judge. I appreciate it. No, thank you.
Thank you. So the next question is for Judge McAfee. And give me one moment. What injustices have you witnessed inside or outside of the courtroom, and what was your response to those?
So I think, injustice can come in many different forms. And, I hate to start to sound like a broken record, but to me, I had a real problem when I showed up and I had 25 defendants who had been in jail over 1,000 days. I had one defendant who had been in jail for 9 years waiting for trial. And that to me felt like an injustice. And clearly our system is not firing on all cylinders when we've reached that point. I mean, we had over 100 defendants in jail waiting for their day in court, over 53 pending murder cases. So to me, that's something where I'm right there at the helm of the ship. I can do something about it and change that. And so that's what we did. We closed that 9-year case. We closed over 350 others. We're down to 20 murder cases. I counted the day. I count almost every day. I've got 35 people in jail waiting for their trial, and only 8 of those have been in over a year. So we have significantly got back up to speed where I can have I can hold my chin up a little higher and say we are doing things right in my docket when I showed up, because that to me was not how it should work.
Thank you so very much. Judge Krause, I want to ask you, let me find it. I had it here. Okay, here we go. My apologies. Please describe for me an instance in which you have faced an ethical dilemma and how you resolved it.
Well, we face ethical dilemmas in the courtroom all the time. I mean, part of a judge's job is to be familiar with the judicial canons and be familiar with the rules of ethics, and to ensure that lawyers are abiding by them and that the judge is abiding by them. It's hard to identify a specific ethical consideration as a judge because frequently, by the time it's brought to my attention, it is past the point. It's an issue where we might be at the post-trial issue, and I'm just finding out about perhaps a lack of qualification or preparedness by an attorney. And I will say that most frequently, the ethical issues that arise in my courtroom on a fairly routine basis is when a criminal defendant expresses concern about the number of times they've been in contact with their attorney. And that is an ethical concern because lawyers are obligated by the rules of ethics to be prepared and to stay in communication with their client. And so one of the things that I will frequently do is hold frequent calendars so that I have that lawyer in my courtroom and I can say, your client is right here today. So why don't y'all sit here and talk it out? I have a conference room right over there and talk through what's going on and report back to me. And that can help address that issue.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we are going to go into our last question of each of you. So we're going to begin to wrap this up. But I do have a question for you, Judge Krause. How will you manage or balance your work in the cases, ensuring that each of them receives the proper attention?
Be prepared, as the Scout motto says. I think that the way that you get through the volume of cases and the complexity of cases that exist in Fulton County is by making sure that you are prepared. And so also back to your earlier question, by making sure you have a wonderful staff. And so they're the ones that make sure that cases are calendared when they need to be, and that defendants, if they're in custody, are brought over, or that defendants who are not in custody get notice that they have a hearing so that they can appear. And once they do their job, my job is to be prepared and know what the issues are, know what the history of that case is. So, for example, I know that the lawyer came in at the last hearing and said, I'm not ready to go because I need X, so that I can say, well, have you done X yet? And so that's the main way that you manage the docket, is by being prepared and having a good team. So
Thank you so very much. Judge McAfee, real simple, what sets you apart from your opponent?
Well, I think, as I indicated before, I think it comes down a lot to, in these judicial races, we can't make promises, but the one thing that I can promise is that I can be fair. And I think that people have been able to see that in the way I've done the job. Excuse me. And I think it also just comes down to having a track record and having a resume that shows you're passionate about trial work, and that's what you want to focus on. And so that's what I've tried to emphasize throughout this process, and I think that's what how I stand apart.
Thank you so very much. Thank you both for your responses. Ladies and gentlemen, you have just heard from two qualified candidates vying to serve as returning incumbents as Fulton County Superior Court judges of the Atlanta Judicial Circuit. The elected Superior Court judge will serve a term of 4 years that begins on January 25th and ends on December 2028. I'm sorry, January 2025, excuse me, and ends December 2028.
So with that said, we would like to, we've asked 11 questions of each of the candidates. And again, they are running for two different Superior Court seats, both for the Atlanta Judicial Circuit. And I would like to go ahead and get started with the closing statements. And so my ask of each of you is to share with our audience, in person and our virtual audience, how the constituents can reach you. Do you have a website? Can they get a yard sign? Can they donate? Can they volunteer? What is it that you want them to know? Platform information, or what have you. But you'll have 2 minutes to share that information. So I'm going to go in, we're going to go in alphabetical order by last name. So Judge Krause, if you will, 2 minutes, please.
thank you. So what I think I would like people to know, first, the way to find me. I have a website. It's judgerachelkrause.org. Krause is spelled Krause. Not everybody knows that. I find myself having to spell it more than I might have expected. But it's judgerachelkrause.org. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram, so you can find me. I think that beyond the work that I do at the court, I think the thing I'd like people to know is, I'm a lifelong Georgian. I went to school in Georgia, and I chose to move to Atlanta to go to the big city, so that I could raise my family here, and be a part of all the things that make Atlanta great. And so when I had the opportunity, after serving as a lawyer for about 18 years, to put my hat in the ring for to be a judge for this job, it was with the idea that I might contribute to the community that I have enjoyed so much and I have felt so welcomed by for the 18 plus years I've been here now, but 15 plus years. But Atlanta has been really good to my family and to my work. And so being a judge was an opportunity to give back to that community and to feel like I had an impact on the community. What I've tried to do since becoming a judge to do that return, to give back to the community, is not just manage my docket, and not just treat people with the inherent dignity and respect that they deserve, but also to work for the betterment of the court generally, to help solve problems like how to have Zoom hearings and how to pick juries remotely when the pandemic happened, to things like helping write pattern jury instructions, and serving on the court's executive committee to help solve all of the problems that go with running a judicial system as large as ours. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And Judge McAfee, your 2-minute closing
Sure.
statement.
Thank you so much, Kathy. So if you're interested in the campaign, it's keepjudgemcafee.com, or if you want to shoot me an email, it's keepjudgemcafee@gmail.com. I'd be happy to respond. And if you want to see what I do in a courtroom, I mentioned we've got over 60 videos, I think, now uploaded. So and that's at Judge Scott McAfee, and that's on YouTube. But the bottom line and the message I've been trying to convey the entire time is that when I used to give a closing argument in front of a jury, I'd always invoke, that statue of Lady Justice. And the idea is that she's blinded from the things that don't matter. She's not focused on partisan politics or race or economic status. She's trying to focus on the facts and get to the truth as best she can find it. And that's the approach I've tried to take as a judge. Throughout this campaign, I'm proud to say that I've got the support through endorsements, through contributions of prosecutors, of defense attorneys, of Republicans, of Democrats, of plaintiffs' lawyers, of defense counsel. I've tried to run this campaign to send a clear message of bipartisanship, and that the focus in my courtroom is to get you in there in a timely fashion and to make sure that you have your day in court. And it's as simple as that. And so I'd ask for your support and for your vote on May 21st. Thank you so much.
Thank you so very much, Judge McAfee and Judge Krause. Again, ladies and gentlemen, the elected Superior Court judges will serve a 4-year term that begins January 25th, 2025 and ends December 2028. Their future lies in your hand. As a constituent and a voter of the Fulton County community, it is our hope that you will use your vote as your voice to elect fair representation. I want to give out a few following dates to keep in your mind. Early voting has already started, and it will end on May 17th. May 21st is the primary election day. June 18th is the primary runoff elections. October 15th through November 1st, early voting in person begins. October 25th, last day to request an absentee ballot. October 19th, 20th, October 26th, and 27th are Saturday and Sunday voting. And finally, November 5th is Election Day. I was being timed too. I didn't know.
So to our audience, as a resident of Fulton County, you owe it to yourself, to your family, to your neighbors, your community, to help elect the next qualified public servant that will help govern and develop policy in this great county. It's the largest county in the state of Georgia. So in closing, I'll leave you with this. Be an educated and informed voter, and know before you go. Know who is on your ballot, know what is on your ballot, know when to vote, and know where to vote. And more so than anything, go to the Secretary of State's website and pull your voter card. You want to make sure that you are still a registered voter, and you want to make sure that you are still in the correct district. Pull a sample ballot because the district lines have been redrawn. So thank you again for joining us this evening. We've had a great time, and we certainly appreciate our guests, Judge Scott McAfee and Judge Krause. We appreciate you coming out and joining us as well. Thank you. So I'm going to turn this back over to Ms. Damita Chatman. Thank you.
I want to thank my moderators, Kathy and Joe. Thank you. Thank you for my guests for coming. Again, this is Citizens for Excellence in Elected Leaders. We're going to take some pictures with these judges. This is not endorsement, and this is going to be the only time you get to take a picture with me. I'm asking these two judges also, as I asked the rest, to please leave this pastor church a donation. I asked $25. I know you didn't get the email, but your people that whoever's taking care of your campaign, if they didn't tell you that, then that's the email that I sent out. Again, I want to thank you guys for coming. The vote is up to you guys. It's not up to me. My household gonna vote. You guys vote. This election is very important. I want to thank the man of this house, Pastor Chris, for allowing us to come in. We got 2 more forms, and we're going to close it out with Thursday night with Commissioner Hall, and we're going to close it Monday night final with them other candidates. We want to thank you. Our goal is just to get the information out and the voters make their own decision. Thank you so much, Pastor.
Thank you so much, Sister Chapman, and thank you to those participating on the forum this evening. We're so thankful to have you in our humble house. And we're thankful for those in the audience and for those who are online through the different platforms. You know, there's an interesting piece as they brought the focus to us here in the closing about now the choice is up to the voters. And there was a book that I picked up, and some of you who are readers probably have read it, and it just blew me away. I was on an airplane, and a gentleman had it sitting beside me, and the title just captured me. The title of the book is "Start with Why." Simon Sinek writes that book, and he points out how we can make assumptions, and in making assumptions, it can be a tiny bit of information. He uses an example of the fact that there was an elected national official that was being installed in office, and he's being installed in office, and he had a background of being a Roman Catholic. And he had a background of having his predecessor there. As he told his story, because he wanted to kind of capture everybody's attention and make them to think in terms of what they were assuming. And they were assuming that he was talking about John Kennedy being installed as president, but he wasn't. He actually was talking about Adolf Hitler, because he had left out one important detail. You're not wasting time by participating in these forums. It's very important to get all of the details, to get all of the information as you make an informed decision as you vote in all of these elections. And so just know that we're praying for you on a regular basis. We're praying for all of the candidates. We're thankful for being able to offer our facility here to be used for these. And so I'm going to close out this time this evening with a prayer for all of us. Father, we just thank you. Thank you again for how you asked us to come to you with all of our needs. And so, Father, our society, our neighborhoods, our families, even our judicial system should be prayed for. And so, Father, I pray that you will remind even the candidates in this race that they are being lifted up, that they're being covered in prayer, even as your word directs us to do. And Father, as they go about their duties and their details, and even as they go further and to campaign in this cycle, I pray, God, that you would protect them, go with them, and Father, that people will hear what they need to hear, answering their why questions. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you all for coming. Good to meet you. God bless you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming. God bless you.
Don't do a couple of pictures. Joe, how you want the pictures? Mr. O, how you want?
I'm attached to the microphone. I'm sorry.
It's quite all.
So how you want the picture? The cross, I didn't get it again. Okay.
Okay. I'll sort of turn right here and then. Okay. I don't want to run over anybody's toes. I'll get to
I'm also.
So lunch was good.
Title, we have 2 more that need to get it. Which y'all in here? So you.
Second judge here.
Oh, y'all want, yeah.
I'm sorry.
Oh, that sounds delicious. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Yeah. And feel free to reach out anytime. This is a great. program. Oh, yeah, I grab that stuff.
There you go, there you go.
Not my job.